He left me for a rich woman. But I came back owning everything. The air in the executive boardroom at Ontiveros Construction was thick enough to cut with a knife. It wasn't just the standard tension of a high-stakes business meeting. It was the palpable fear of the unknown, a heavy blanket smothering the room. Outside, the Chicago morning was bright and clear, the sky a sharp blue against the towering glass and steel of the city skyline visible through the massive windows. But inside, the light felt dim, oppressive, reflecting the mood of the people gathered around the long, polished mahogany table. They were the top executives, the men and women who ran this company, and their faces were tight with apprehension. The news had hit them like a shockwave days ago. The company was being acquired, bought out by a mysterious, powerful investment group from out of nowhere. Now, they were waiting for the representative of these new owners, the person who held their careers, their livelihoods, their entire professional identities in their hands. They whispered amongst themselves, their voices low and nervous, speculating, worrying, trying to grasp the scale of the change that was about to sweep through their carefully constructed world. I stood just outside the doorway for a long moment, unseen, unheard. I watched them, observed the subtle shifts in their postures, the way their eyes darted around, the forced smiles and tight jaws. I took in the expensive art on the walls, the plush carpet, the sheer, undeniable wealth and power that this room represented. It was a world I had once been adjacent to, a world I had lost everything in. And then I saw him, Michael, sitting in his usual chair, the one closest to where the president sat, looking just as anxious as the rest, maybe even more so. A cold, hard knot formed instantly in my stomach, tightening and spreading into my chest, making it difficult to take a full breath. It wasn't just about the company for him, I knew. He must have heard the rumors about the buyers, heard names or details that hinted at a past he had meticulously tried to bury, a past he thought was dead and gone forever. And now, that past was standing right here, in the doorway of his carefully built empire. His hands were gripping the edge of the table so tightly that the skin stretched white over his knuckles, bone white against the slight tan of his skin. He was trying desperately to appear calm, in control, but I could see the fine tremor running through his arms, the slight, involuntary twitch near his eye. He was scared. Truly. Deeply scared. And seeing that fear on his face, the face that had once held so much power over me, sent a strange, complex jolt through me. It wasn't simple joy or revenge. It was something deeper, a quiet, potent sense of vindication, a deep-seated satisfaction that settled cold and heavy in my bones. I pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. My entrance was slow, deliberate, measured. The low hum of conversation died instantly. The room fell into a heavy, absolute silence. So quiet you could hear the faint, distant sounds of the city outside, the low, steady hum of the building systems, and the loud, frantic beating of their own hearts. Every single eye in that room snapped towards me. I walked towards the head of the table, towards the empty chair that awaited the new authority. Every click of my heels on the polished marble floor echoed in the silence, each sound a precise, unavoidable announcement of my presence. I wore a dark suit, simple in its lines but perfectly tailored. A suit that felt less like clothing and more like a second skin, a layer of armor. My dark hair was pulled back tight and neat, revealing the clean lines of my face. A face that was calm, controlled. It showed nothing of the years of struggle, the pain, the tears shed in the dark. This face was a mask, revealing nothing but quiet strength and an unnerving stillness. But it was my eyes that held them. Dark, deep, steady. They didn't flinch or dart away. They didn't show nerves or uncertainty. Just a deep, unwavering stillness, the kind that comes from having faced the absolute worst and somehow, impossibly survived, the kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice. They stared at me, their expressions a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and a dawning sense of unease. Who was this woman? She wasn't anyone they knew. She didn't fit their expectations of a corporate takeover artist. There was a quiet intensity about her, a presence that filled the room without being loud or aggressive. They whispered questions, their eyes flicking from me to each other, trying to place me, to understand my role. Was she a lawyer, an heiress, a foreign investor, someone's daughter? They didn't know. They couldn't know. They didn't see the years I had spent invisible, the nights I had gone hungry, the endless, grinding struggle to build something from absolutely nothing. They just saw the woman standing there, radiating a quiet, undeniable power that felt too big for their carefully controlled world. And then, my eyes met Michael's again. He was still frozen in his chair, his gaze locked onto me. For a long moment, the room, the table, the other people, they all blurred away. It was just him and me, and that look in his eyes. It was the precise moment his worst fear became a terrifying reality. The woman he had called simple, the one he had discarded like trash, the one he believed he had broken and left for dead, was standing here, changed, powerful, unbroken. The shock on his face was absolute, a silent, visceral reaction that spoke volumes. He looked like he had seen a ghost, a vengeful spirit returned from the grave. The color drained from his face, leaving it pale and drawn. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He was trying to compose himself, to regain his executive mask. But the fear was too raw, too visible. He was just another man now, looking at me with a mixture of disbelief and terror. The power had shifted. Completely. Irrevocably. The man who had once held my entire life in his hands was now just an employee in a company that belonged to me. I walked the final few steps to the head of the table and sat down in the empty chair. My movements were calm, deliberate. I opened the simple leather briefcase I carried and took out the documents. The rustle of the paper sounded loud in the silence. I placed them on the table before me. My voice, when I spoke, was low, clear, and steady. It carried easily through the room, cutting through the tension. "Good morning," I said. My voice was completely devoid of personal emotion, purely professional. "My name is Catherine. I represent the investment group that has acquired Ontiveros Construction. As of this moment, I am assuming control as the new CEO." The words landed like heavy stones, each one final and undeniable. I began to outline the immediate steps, the changes that would be implemented, the new direction the company would take. My focus was entirely on the business, on the facts, the figures, the future. I spoke of restructuring, efficiency, market strategy. Michael sat rigidly in his seat, his eyes fixed on me, then darting away, unable to hold my gaze for more than a second or two. I could feel the weight of his stare, a palpable mix of disbelief, fear, and perhaps, just perhaps, a flicker of something that might have been regret, quickly buried under layers of shock and self-preservation. He was just another face in the room now, one of many looking at me for direction, for their fate. The carefully constructed hierarchy he had thrived in was gone, replaced by a new order where I held all the cards. The irony was sharp, almost overwhelming in its completeness. I finished my brief opening statement. I closed my briefcase with a quiet click. I stood up. "That is all for this morning," I said. My voice remained calm, purely business. Further instructions and individual meetings will follow. I turned and walked towards the door. I did not look back at Michael. There was no need. The look on his face when he recognized me, the absolute terror in his eyes, was all the confirmation I needed. The past was no longer a burden I carried. It was the silent, powerful force that had propelled me here, and his reckoning had just begun. The roar of O'Hare International Airport was a physical assault on my senses, a deafening, chaotic symphony of announcements, rolling suitcases, and hurried conversations that felt utterly alien to the silent, internal implosion happening inside me. The bright, fluorescent lights of the terminal seemed to glare, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating the sudden, terrifying darkness that had just swallowed my world whole. I stood there, frozen in the middle of the rushing crowd, clutching the worn handle of my single, battered suitcase. It was an old thing, a relic from a life that no longer existed, and it contained everything I now owned. Every single tangible piece of my former existence was packed into that small, scuffed case. He had just walked away. Michael. My husband of 10 years. The man whose name I had taken, whose home I had made my own, whose life I had woven mine into, strand by painstaking strand. The man whose future I had believed was inextricably linked with mine. He stood a few feet away now, impatient, already turning his attention toward the security line, towards the gates, towards the future he was so eager to embrace. Beside him was Tiffany, her laugh light and careless, a sound that grated on my raw nerves. Her hand rested casually on his arm, a possessive gesture that spoke volumes. They looked like a couple embarking on a glamorous adventure, heading off to some exotic destination, not two people who had just systematically dismantled and destroyed another human being's entire existence. He hadn't even had the decency to look me in the eye when he delivered the final blow. His words were flat, devoid of any emotion, any hint of the shared history, the memories, the life we had built together. "This isn't working anymore, Catherine," he had said, his voice as cold and impersonal as a machine. "I'm leaving you. Tiffany and I are starting a new life together." He didn't offer an explanation, didn't apologize, didn't show a single flicker of remorse or regret. It was clinical, brutal, a surgical cut severing me from everything I knew. He simply handed me a folded envelope. Not a plane ticket, not a key to a new place, just a small amount of cash, a pittance. "This is for you," he said, his voice dismissive, as if handing a few dollars to a beggar on the street. "Don't try to contact me. Don't come looking for me." It was a command, a final, cruel instruction meant to ensure my complete and utter disappearance from his life. In that moment, I wasn't a person to him anymore. I was an inconvenience, a problem to be disposed of, a loose end to be tied up quickly and cleanly with a few crumpled bills and a heartless command. My mind couldn't grasp the reality of it. It felt surreal, like a horrifying scene in a movie I was somehow trapped inside. My body felt numb, heavy, disconnected from the bustling world around me. The air felt thin, hard to draw into my lungs. My chest ached, with a deep, hollow pain that spread like a poison through my entire being. A physical manifestation of the emotional wound. He turned then, his back to me, and walked away with her. Towards the security checkpoint, towards the gates, towards their new life. He didn't glance back, not even a quick look over his shoulder. It was the most definitive, most final act of erasure. In that moment, standing alone in the middle of a crowded airport terminal, surrounded by thousands of strangers rushing to their destinations, to their families, to their lives, I felt utterly invisible, like I had ceased to exist. The life I had known, the future I had planned, the identity I had held for the past decade, it all dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind a vast, terrifying void. The suitcase felt impossibly heavy in my hand, a physical representation of the meager, pathetic remnants of my life. The small amount of money in the envelope felt like a cruel, mocking joke. How was I supposed to survive? Where was I supposed to go? I had no family nearby, no close friends who weren't also intertwined with Michael's life. I was completely alone, adrift in a sea of millions, with no anchor, no direction, and no glimmer of hope. The pain wasn't just an abstract emotional concept. It was a crushing physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it impossible to move, to think clearly, to even breathe properly. I sank slowly to the cold, hard floor of the terminal, the sounds of the airport fading into a distant muffled roar, leaving only the echo of his final, cutting words and the deafening silence of my own despair. I was abandoned, truly and completely, in a place designed for journeys, with nowhere left in the world for me to go. The days and nights that followed the airport were a relentless, brutal cycle of cold, gnawing hunger, and constant, paralyzing fear. Chicago. The city I had only known from the comfortable distance of Michael's wife, a place of warm apartments, familiar restaurants, and predictable routines, transformed overnight into a vast, indifferent, and often hostile wilderness. My single suitcase, once just luggage, became a heavy, cumbersome burden, dragging behind me as I walked miles upon endless miles, searching for a place to simply exist without being noticed, without being threatened, without being told to move along. Every park bench, every bus station waiting area, every sheltered doorway, every hidden alleyway became a potential, temporary refuge, a precarious spot to rest my aching body for a few hours. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself, snatched in short, uneasy bursts, always with one eye half open, my body coiled tight with the fear of being discovered, attacked, or simply rousted by the police or a security guard. Hunger became a constant, physical ache, a hollow emptiness that never truly went away. The small amount of cash Michael had given me vanished quickly, barely covering a few cheap, unsatisfying meals from convenience stores. I learned to eye garbage cans with a mixture of desperation and shame, looking for discarded food, a humiliation that chipped away daily at my already fragile sense of self-worth. The city's abundance was a cruel, constant taunt. Food was everywhere, in brightly lit restaurants, overflowing grocery stores, and tempting bakeries. But it was all out of reach, behind glass windows and locked doors. My body grew weaker with each passing day. My clothes became dirty and worn, stained and torn, my physical appearance a mirror of the decay and despair I felt inside. I tried to stay clean when I could, using public restrooms in libraries or train stations, but it was a constant struggle against the grime and exhaustion of living on the streets. Finding work became an obsession, a desperate, daily quest that ended, almost without exception, in soul-crushing disappointment and rejection. I went to every place I could think of that might hire someone with no recent work history and no fixed address. Diners, laundromats, small shops, cleaning services, construction sites asking for day labor. I filled out endless applications with shaky hands, my lack of experience in any kind of manual or service work, and the glaring absence of references, a seemingly insurmountable barrier. Each rejection was a fresh wound, a confirmation of Michael's cruel words, that I was useless, incapable of surviving on my own, that I had nothing to offer the world. People looked through me, or worse, with suspicion, pity, or outright disdain. I was just another homeless person, invisible to the vast majority, a problem to be avoided or ignored. The loneliness was a physical weight, a heavy cloak that threatened to suffocate me. Surrounded by millions of people, in one of the busiest cities in the country, I had never felt so utterly, completely alone. There was no one to talk to, no one to share the burden, no one to offer a word of kindness, encouragement, or even simple recognition. I was a ghost moving through the city, unseen, unheard, unwanted. Despair was a constant companion, whispering insidious thoughts in my ear. There were moments, standing on a bridge overlooking the dark, cold river, or watching the commuter trains rush by, filled with people going home to warm beds and families, when the thought of simply ending it all felt like the only possible escape from the relentless pain, the exhaustion, and the utter hopelessness of my situation. But something deep inside me, a stubborn flicker of defiance, a refusal to let him win completely, to let his actions be the final chapter of my story, kept me going. I was surviving, barely, living on the edge of existence. But I was surviving. The city was a brutal, unforgiving teacher, stripping away everything I thought I knew about life and myself, leaving behind only the raw, primal instinct to endure. Just as the cold indifference of the city and the crushing weight of my despair felt like they would finally break me completely, a small, unexpected glimmer of warmth appeared in the relentless darkness. I was walking through a different neighborhood, a little older, a little quieter than the bustling downtown, the kind of place with tree-lined streets, brownstone buildings, and small, independent businesses nestled together. It felt like a different world, a stark contrast to the harsh concrete and glass canyons I had been navigating. My feet ached with a dull, constant pain. My stomach was empty and cramping, and I felt the familiar wave of hopelessness washing over me, threatening to pull me under. And then I saw it, a small diner on a corner, its windows glowing with a soft, inviting light that seemed to push back the gathering dusk. The sign above the door was simple, painted in cheerful red letters, Eleanor's Diner. I hesitated on the sidewalk, watching the few customers inside through the steamy windows. The scene inside looked warm, safe, normal. The smell of fresh coffee brewing, sweet pastries just out of the oven, and something else, something comforting and savory like grilled onions, drifted out into the cold air. A scent that felt like a forgotten memory of home, of comfort, of a life I no longer had. As I stood there, shivering slightly, lost in hunger and exhaustion, the front door of the diner opened, and a woman stepped out with a broom to sweep the small patch of sidewalk in front of her establishment. She was older, probably in her late 60s or early 70s, her face etched with the lines that come from years of living. But her eyes were remarkably kind, and her mouth held a gentle, steady curve. She looked up and saw me standing there, a figure of obvious hardship and need, looking lost and broken, probably looking like I hadn't eaten or slept properly in weeks. She stopped sweeping. She didn't look away or pretend not to see me. She just looked at me for a long moment. Her gaze was steady, assessing, but there was no judgment in her eyes, no suspicion, no fear. Just a quiet understanding that seemed to reach right into the core of my being. It was the first time in what felt like an eternity that I felt truly seen by another human being, not just looked at with pity or disdain. "Are you okay, dear?" she asked. Her voice was gentle, a little raspy with age, but warm and kind, like the feeling of holding a hot mug on a cold day. I must have looked like a total mess, because I couldn't even answer her at first. The simple kindness in her voice, the unexpected human connection, was too much for my fragile state. Tears welled up in my eyes instantly, hot and uncontrollable. The sadness, fear, and exhaustion I had been holding back for so long, finally spilling over. I just shook my head, unable to speak past the thick lump that had formed in my throat. She put the broom down carefully against the wall of the diner. "Come inside," she said, stepping towards me. "It's too cold to be out here looking so sad and lost, and you look like you could use something warm to eat." Hesitantly, not quite believing this was real, that someone was actually offering me help, I followed her into the diner. It was small, but spotlessly clean, every surface gleaming, and felt incredibly cozy and welcoming. The air inside was thick with those wonderful smells: coffee, baking, comfort. She led me to a booth by the window, the kind with comfortable red vinyl seats, and told me to sit down. "My name is Eleanor," she said, giving me a small, genuine smile. I own this place. Been here 40 years. She didn't press me for details right away. She simply went behind the counter and came back a few minutes later with a steaming mug of coffee and a plate piled high with scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and buttered toast. It was the most wonderful, most beautiful thing I had seen in days, maybe weeks. The smell alone made my empty stomach ache even more. I started to eat slowly, almost reverently, savoring every single bite. It tasted like heaven, like nourishment and hope. While I ate, she sat across from me in the booth. She didn't push or hurry me. She just sat there, her presence quiet and comforting, a silent anchor in the storm. As I ate, the warm food spreading through my cold body, thawing some of the fear and tension, I started to talk, hesitantly at first, my voice quiet and shaky, barely above a whisper. I told her a little bit about why I was alone, about having nothing, about being left with nowhere to go. I didn't tell her everything about Michael, not the deepest pain or the full extent of the betrayal, but I told her enough for her to understand that I was in deep trouble, that I had been left completely alone and destitute. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, her kind eyes filled with sympathy. But there was also a quiet strength about her, a resilience I could see etched in the lines around her eyes and the set of her mouth. "While life can throw some hard punches sometimes," she said softly, "knock you right off your feet when you least expect it." She looked at me directly, her gaze steady and kind. "But you don't have to stay down." She paused, thinking for a moment, her gaze drifting around her small, beloved diner. "I could use some help here at the diner," she said, turning back to me. "Washing dishes in the back, cleaning tables, helping out with customers when it gets busy. It's honest work. It wouldn't pay much cash at first, not until you get properly on your feet. But I have a small room upstairs, right over the kitchen, that you could use. It's not fancy, mind you, just a simple room, but it's clean and warm. It would give you a roof over your head and food in your belly. What do you say?" I stared at her, stunned into silence once more. A job, a place to stay, from a complete stranger who owed me nothing. It felt unreal, like something out of a movie, something that couldn't possibly be happening to me, not after everything. It felt like a miracle. Tears started to fall again, but this time they weren't tears of sadness or fear or despair. They were tears of overwhelming relief, of unbelievable gratitude, of a fragile, nascent hope blooming in the barren landscape of my life. My voice was thick with emotion, barely a whisper. "Yes," I managed to say, the word catching in my throat. "Oh, yes, please, thank you. Thank you so much." Eleanor's diner became my safe harbor, my lifeline in the storm that had consumed me. Eleanor didn't ask for anything more than hard work, honesty, and a willingness to try. She was a tough boss sometimes. She expected you to pull your weight and do things right, but she was always fair, and she treated me with a respect I hadn't felt in years. In that little diner, surrounded by the comforting smell of coffee and baking, the clatter of dishes, the quiet hum of conversation, and the steady, unwavering kindness of a woman who saw my pain and chose to extend a hand, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could make it. It was the first step, a small, shaky step, out of the deep darkness I had been living in, the very beginning of building a new life, one small, uncertain piece at a time. It was the hand up I desperately needed, the chance to breathe again, to stand on my own 2 feet, and to start the long, difficult climb towards becoming the woman who would one day walk into a boardroom and reclaim everything that was taken from her. Life at Eleanor's diner settled into a rhythm that was both grueling and strangely comforting. The small room upstairs, directly over the kitchen, was basic. A narrow bed, a worn dresser, a single window that looked out onto the alley and the backs of other buildings. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was safe. And it was warm. The heat from the kitchen below rising through the floorboards, a constant low hum that felt like a heartbeat beneath my feet. I was exhausted most of the time. The physical labor was a shock to a body that had grown accustomed to a life of relative ease. My muscles screamed in protest. My hands were perpetually raw and chapped from the hot, soapy water, and there were days when I felt like I couldn't possibly lift another tray or scrub another greasy pan. But I did. Every single day, I pushed through the fatigue, the soreness, the lingering ache in my heart. Working in the back of the diner was a world of its own. The air was thick with the mingled smells of frying bacon, simmering coffee, and the sharp tang of cleaning supplies. The clatter of dishes was a constant soundtrack, punctuated by the hiss of the grill, the rhythmic thud of the dishwasher, and the occasional shouted order from the front. It was a chaotic, demanding environment, but it required focus, precision, and speed. I learned to move with efficiency, to anticipate the flow of dirty dishes, to keep the clean ones stacked and ready. It wasn't just about washing, it was about being part of a system, a small, crucial cog in the machine that kept the diner running smoothly. There was a quiet satisfaction in that, in knowing that my labor, no matter how humble, was necessary. Eleanor watched me, her presence a quiet anchor in the bustling kitchen. She rarely raised her voice, but her expectations were clear. She noticed everything. A dish not quite clean enough, a corner missed during sweeping, a moment of distraction. Her corrections were always direct, sometimes sharp, but never unkind. "If you're going to do something," she'd say, her voice low but firm, "do it right." There's dignity in doing a job well, no matter what the job is. She taught me that attention to detail wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about respect. Respect for the work, for the customers, and for yourself. Gradually, she started giving me more responsibilities. She moved me out of the dish pit and onto the floor, clearing tables, refilling coffee cups, interacting with the customers. This was harder in a different way. It required a different kind of resilience, a willingness to engage with people when I still felt raw and exposed. I had to learn to smile, to make small talk, to navigate the sometimes demanding personalities of the breakfast and lunch crowds. Eleanor taught me how to read people, how to anticipate their needs before they even asked, how to handle complaints with grace and patience. "Everyone comes in here for more than just food," she told me one quiet afternoon as we wiped down tables. "They come for a little bit of comfort, a little bit of connection. Your job isn't just to serve them a meal. It's to make them feel welcome, to make them feel seen." Her lessons went beyond the practicalities of running a diner. She talked about life, about hardship, about the importance of standing on your own 2 feet. She shared stories from her own life, tales of overcoming challenges, of building her business from nothing after her husband passed away. Her resilience wasn't a performance. It was simply who she was, forged over decades of hard work and quiet perseverance. She showed me that strength wasn't about being tough or emotionless. It was about facing difficulties head-on, about finding the courage to keep going even when you felt like giving up. She taught me about the quiet power of dignity, the importance of holding your head high, no matter what life threw at you. In that warm, noisy diner, surrounded by the comforting smells and the steady presence of a woman who embodied quiet strength, I wasn't just earning a living. I was rebuilding my spirit, learning the fundamental lessons of self-reliance and dignity that would form the bedrock of the life I was slowly, painstakingly, building for myself. The idea didn't come to me in a flash of inspiration. It grew slowly, nurtured by the long hours of work and the quiet moments of reflection in my small room above the diner. I had seen firsthand at Eleanor's the power of a well-run, customer-focused business, even a small one. I had learned the importance of reliability, of quality service, of treating people right. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was capable of more. I had been stripped of everything, but in that stripping, I had discovered a core of resilience I never knew I possessed. I wanted to build something that was truly mine, something that couldn't be taken away, something that reflected the values I had come to hold dear: integrity, hard work, and a commitment to creating value, not just extracting it. My time in Michael's world, while ultimately destructive, had given me a peripheral understanding of the business landscape, particularly in the construction and property sectors. I had heard the jargon, seen the deals made, and understood the basic mechanics of how large-scale projects operated. Coupled with the ground-level operational knowledge I'd gained at the diner, managing inventory, scheduling, customer relations, handling unexpected problems, I felt a growing confidence that I could bridge these two worlds. I saw an opportunity in the commercial property sector, a consistent need for reliable, high-quality maintenance and cleaning services that were often overlooked or poorly executed by larger firms. Starting out was terrifying. Every dollar I had saved, painstakingly put aside from my meager wages and tips, went into this venture. I bought a used van that coughed and sputtered but ran, invested in basic cleaning equipment and supplies, and printed simple flyers at a local copy shop. My first clients were small businesses, local offices, places that were willing to take a chance on a new, unknown service. I did everything myself in those early days: the marketing, the sales, the scheduling, and the cleaning itself. The work was often solitary, performed late at night or early in the morning, scrubbing floors in empty offices, cleaning bathrooms, polishing windows. There were moments of doubt, moments when the sheer scale of the undertaking felt overwhelming, when the exhaustion threatened to swallow me whole. But I pushed through, fueled by a fierce determination to succeed, to prove to myself, if no one else, that I could build something real and lasting. As I secured more contracts and the workload became too much for one person, I began to hire. This was a crucial step, one I approached with the lessons of Eleanor firmly in mind. I didn't just look for people with experience. I looked for people who were reliable, honest, and willing to work hard. I sought out individuals who, like me, might have faced barriers or needed an opportunity. I paid them fairly, trained them meticulously, and treated them with the same respect and dignity that Eleanor had shown me. I wanted to create a workplace where people felt valued, where their contributions were recognized, where they could earn a decent living and feel proud of the work they did. My business wasn't just a means to an end. It was becoming a vehicle for creating positive change, for extending the hand up that I had received. The business grew organically, built on a reputation for reliability, quality, and integrity. Word spread. Larger contracts came in. I expanded the services offered, moving into minor repairs, landscaping, and eventually, full property management. The single beat-up van became a small fleet of clean, well-maintained vehicles. The handful of employees grew into a dedicated team of professionals. My company, forged in the fires of adversity and built on the quiet principles of a diner owner, was becoming a significant player in the local commercial services market. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the value of hard work, and the enduring impact of a single act of kindness. I had not only survived, I had built a new life, a new identity, and a new future, brick by painstaking brick, on a foundation of my own making. Years passed. My business thrived, growing in size, scope, and reputation. I was no longer the lost, broken woman who had stumbled into Eleanor's diner. I was a successful businesswoman, respected in my field, financially independent, and secure in my own strength. The wounds of the past had healed, leaving scars, yes, but scars that served as reminders of how far I had come, not as sources of lingering pain. The thought of Michael and the life I had lost rarely occupied my daily thoughts. My focus was on the present, on my business, on the people who worked for me, and on the future I was actively shaping. but the world has a way of bringing things full circle. As my company expanded, I began to look for strategic acquisition opportunities, ways to grow not just organically, but through calculated mergers and purchases. I had a team of sharp financial analysts and legal advisors who scoured the market, identifying potential targets. Ontiveros Construction appeared on their radar. It was a well-established company, with valuable assets and a solid market position, but it had been stagnating, perhaps lacking dynamic leadership or struggling with internal inefficiencies. From a purely business perspective, it was an attractive target. The moment I saw the name Ontiveros Construction on the list of potential acquisitions, a strange, cold calm settled over me. It wasn't the jolt of old pain or a surge of vengeful excitement. It was a quiet recognition, a sense of inevitability. This was the company where Michael worked, where he had continued his ascent after leaving me with nothing. Acquiring it wasn't about getting back at him. It was about reclaiming a narrative, about demonstrating the ultimate power shift. It was about walking back into that world, not as the discarded wife, but as the force that controlled its destiny. I instructed my team to pursue the acquisition, emphasizing the need for discretion regarding my personal history. To the outside world, the acquiring entity was a faceless investment group. My role was behind the scenes, guiding the strategy, making the key decisions. The process was lengthy and complex, involving due diligence, negotiations, and navigating layers of corporate structure. Throughout it all, I maintained a detached, professional demeanor. My focus remained on the business aspects, the financials, the operations, the integration plan. Michael's presence was a known factor, but not the driving force behind the decision. The day of the meeting, the one described in the very beginning, was the public unveiling of the acquisition, and Ideno, for those who knew me, the ultimate reveal. Walking back into that boardroom, the air thick with anticipation and unease, felt surreal. It was the same room, the same polished table, the same view of the Chicago skyline. But I was different. Every step I took was deliberate, every breath controlled. I saw the faces, the confusion turning to shock as they recognized me. And then I saw Michael. The moment our eyes met, the carefully constructed facade he presented to the world crumbled. The fear in his eyes was raw, unmistakable. He saw not just his new boss, but the woman he had underestimated, discarded, and believed he had erased. He saw the living embodiment of his past mistakes, standing in a position of power he could never have imagined. But as I stood there, addressing the room, outlining the future of Ontiveros Construction under new ownership, the feeling wasn't one of triumphant revenge. It was something far quieter, a deep sense of closure and vindication. It wasn't about making him suffer. It was about demonstrating the truth, that I had not been broken, that I had not disappeared, that I had built something stronger and more enduring than anything he had ever valued. The reckoning wasn't about inflicting pain. It was about reclaiming my power, rewriting my story, and standing tall in a place where I was once made to feel small and insignificant. It was a quiet, profound victory, felt deep within, a confirmation that I had not only survived the storm, but had emerged from it stronger, wiser, and utterly, undeniably free. With the acquisition complete, and the initial integration of Ontiveros Construction into my larger portfolio underway, the intense focus on the business began to shift, allowing space for a deeper reflection on the journey that had brought me here. The moment in the boardroom, the look on Michael's face, the quiet vindication I felt, these were powerful, symbolic events. But they were not the ultimate destination. The true end of the journey wasn't about victory over someone else. It was about finding peace within myself. Letting go of the anger and resentment wasn't a sudden decision, but a gradual process of shedding a heavy weight I had carried for years. It was like peeling back layers of protective armor that were no longer necessary. The bitterness had served a purpose. It had fueled my determination in the darkest times, providing a sharp edge to my resolve. But now, in the light of my hard-won success and security, that anger felt like a burden, a corrosive force that would only hold me back from true freedom. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a gift I gave to Michael. It was a gift I gave to myself. It was the act of releasing the past's hold on my present, of choosing to move forward unburdened by the need for retribution. It was also about forgiving the younger, more naive version of myself, the one who had been so easily hurt, so easily discarded. That forgiveness brought a profound sense of lightness, a quiet settling of the soul. With the weight of the past lifted, my focus naturally turned outwards, towards the possibility of using my resources and experience to help others. I remembered the crushing despair of having nowhere to go, the fear of facing the world completely alone. Eleanor's kindness had been the single most important factor in my survival and eventual success. I wanted to be that lifeline for other women who found themselves in similar desperate circumstances. This led to the establishment of the Women's Shelter, a project that became deeply personal and profoundly meaningful. It wasn't just a financial contribution. I was actively involved in its development and operation, ensuring it provided not just immediate safety and shelter, but also comprehensive support services, counseling, job training, legal aid, childcare, everything a woman might need to regain her footing and build an independent life. Seeing the women there, some arriving broken and terrified, slowly finding their strength and hope, was more rewarding than any business success. It was a living testament to the power of compassion and the possibility of second chances. My relationship with Luciano, Eleanor's son, deepened over the years. After his mother passed, the diner, her legacy, continued under his steady hand. He was a quiet, thoughtful man, possessing his mother's fundamental goodness and gentle spirit. We shared stories about Eleanor, about her wisdom, her resilience, her quiet impact on the lives she touched. Our connection was easy, comfortable, built on shared history and mutual respect. There was a quiet understanding between us, a recognition of the deep bond forged through Eleanor's kindness. Our relationship wasn't about grand romance or dramatic gestures. It was about companionship, shared values, and the comforting presence of someone who understood the quiet strength that lay beneath the surface. It was a relationship that felt like coming home, a gentle affirmation of the enduring power of human connection. Standing now, looking back at the long, arduous road I had traveled, I feel a profound sense of peace and freedom. I am no longer defined by the man who left me or the pain he inflicted. I am defined by the strength I found within, the resilience I cultivated, the empire I built not just of businesses, but of purpose and compassion. The true victory wasn't in acquiring a company or achieving wealth. It was in reclaiming my own life, in finding my voice, in building a future on my own terms, and in discovering that the deepest peace comes not from getting even, but from letting go and choosing kindness. My life, once shattered, is now whole, rich not just in material success, but in meaning, connection, and the quiet, unwavering knowledge that I am finally, truly, free. If my story resonated with you, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future stories of strength and overcoming. Share it, leave a comment below, and let me know which part of my journey spoke to you the most. And click here to watch the next story.